Today we have Laura Marenco on the podcast. She's the creator of the Lean and Strong Body Blueprint and specializes in coaching physique competitors and everyday women trying to lead a healthy life. She's certified through the American Council of Sports Medicine and has multiple certifications through BioLane Coaching. She's been featured multiple times in Oxygen magazine. She's won numerous shows in women's figure competitions. She's helped over 50 competitors to stage. And Laura was born and raised in El Salvador and came to the United States at 17 years old. She's been in the industry for a long time and has a lot of knowledge to share, and we are grateful to have her on the show today. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Luke. It's a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to share all the info that I could help anybody with. So go for it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And now, as we were kind of just talking about, so you're getting ready for a show here. I mean, depending on when this airs, probably pretty soon, right?
Yeah, so actually, I am 2 weeks out from the NPC Universe, which is considered a national competition. So I am competing for a chance of winning my pro status.
Nice. And how are you feeling about that show?
Pretty good. I've been prepping since January, so it's been a minute. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm just kind of coasting in at this point. The work is done, so I'm just, tweaking the last few things that need to be worked on. So
for sure, and we'll definitely get more into kind of how you're prepping for that here a little bit later on. But first of all, a lot of people listen to this and they're probably like, "Wow, she's competing in a show. That's pretty incredible to be able to do something like that and training for a pro card." But kind of as we were talking about off air, there are a lot of struggles and challenges that you've overcome in your own fitness journey and personal journey to get to that point. So let's start from the beginning. So you were born in El Salvador. So what were things like for you growing up?
So I grew up basically in the 80s, and at that point in time, we were going through civil war, so it was pretty tough in the sense of just being safety, right? Regardless of that, everybody made the best out of things, but what back then seems so normal, now looking back, it was pretty stressful, I would say. Like, we would spend weeks without electricity because of war and all that stuff, right? So, but that was pretty normal back then. Regardless, I had a normal childhood. As far as my fitness journey, I would say that I was never the child who could eat anything and not gain weight. I remember having, friends who would eat whatever they wanted to and they would never gain weight, but I was never that kid. So I've always had, issues with gaining weight, losing weight, even through my childhood and through high school. So that was a big focus in my life since early years. And then my mom decided to pack up her kids and move to the US when I was 17 during my senior year. So I was isolating at first, but I brought with me, my interest in fitness. So as soon as I entered college, I recall just reading magazines, because back then all you had was magazines for information and fitness, and just following a program. And that's how I started lifting at age 18. So I remember spending a lot of time in the gym, and that's, how I became pretty good at lifting. And then later on, I got certified through, an organization back then.
For sure. So I want to pause you here a second. So, I mean, obviously, overcame some challenges and a different lifestyle when you came to El Salvador. Was fitness really like much of a thing there with a lot of people you associated with, or was it something you were kind of more introduced to as you got to the United States?
So I was always very inclined towards it. As a teenager, all I knew, well, back then, a lot of people they knew was just cardio, right? So I do recall like going out of my way to do my step class when I was, 15, 16. And I did started lifting just a little bit when I was about 16, 17 as well. But there was, didn't know what I was doing. So there was no actual instruction or anything. So just kind of winging it, if you want to call it that way. So yeah.
So just curious for you, like what was your main motivator? Like you mentioned, maybe you weren't as fit. Like what drove you to fitness? Was it more of a pain or was it more of an interest? Like what drove you to fitness in the first place?
Well, both. As I mentioned, I was pretty isolated when I moved here. And I do recall discovering that when I weight trained, when I went to the gym, when I exercised, I felt so much better afterwards. So I went through periods that I would lift, and go to the gym, consistently, but then there were periods where I didn't. And then I realized, when I am fueling my body correctly, when I'm exercising, I am so much more productive. My mind is so much more clear. And just my life overall is so much better. So when I went through those periods of months where I did not do that, I felt like my life would kind of fall apart in my mental health. So I've been pretty driven towards fitness just as, kind of a coping mechanism, and just makes me feel much better in general.
For sure, for sure. So what before you got into fitness, like what originally were you planning to do? Like were you always planning to, like from the late teens planning to be in the fitness industry, or is it like were you planning on doing something else? You kind of just fell into it?
I didn't know. I think for most of my teenage years and even through my 20s, I was kind of just going through survival mode. I just wanted to get through college. And I actually graduated with a psychology degree. Um, so I wasn't sure what even I was going to do. And I didn't think, oh, my career is going to be in fitness. My plan was to, get a master's degree in counseling, but that did not happen. I worked in my field of psychology only for about 3-4 years. And then I realized this is not what I want to do. So I actually, at that point in time, my son was a baby. So I decided to start training people part-time. And then from there, it just became full-time and coaching and all this stuff. So it was kind of like a accident per se that I do this now. It wasn't a plan.
For sure. So you kind of fell into it, and that's what I tend to find with a lot of people in the fitness
Yeah.
industry, myself included, is it's not always the original plan, but a lot of times when you go through a transformation yourself, it kind of prompts
Yeah.
you to be like, oh wow, I really love this and I want to, give this to others as well. So you mentioned like you had gotten into fitness, obviously, kind of in your late teens, early 20s. So how did things for you specifically in fitness kind of progress from there? Because as we were talking beforehand, like you clearly had some ups and downs along the way.
Yeah. Repeat that question again.
Yeah, so like in your early 20s, first of all, when did you get certified as a personal trainer?
Oh, well, initially I started with ACE, and that was in my late 20s.
Okay.
So my ACE certification didn't come until I was in my 30s already, and I've been renewing since. But yeah, like in my late 20s, I initially got certified, but I never really worked at it as a, per se, as I was just trying to get through college. But I was so interested that I figured this is a good thing to do. I
E-
just, yeah, I was motivated.
Exactly. So you eventually got into actually competing, right? You were competing in shows, figure competitions, which is a division. For those who don't know, there's a bikini division and a figure division in women's competition. So how did you even get into competing? Was that something that like you saw someone else doing, or you just kind of thought of yourself, or like had you thought of that for a while? How did you get into that?
Yeah, so I actually thought about it for a long time, ever since I think competitions for women that were not necessarily bodybuilding didn't happen until like the 90s. So I was always interested, but at that point in time, there was zero guidance, or having a coach was not even a thing. So it was very hard. Like at that point in time, I was just trying, fat diets and things just to see what I would make it happen or not. Um, so it wasn't until I got married, and I remember when I was 29. So I competed in 2007 as my first competition, when I was, after college, when I could actually spend time, dedicate time, because it's very time consuming and, just mentally taxing. So when I was 31, I did my first competition before I had my son. So I did think about it through at least a decade prior. I really want to do this. So then I finally did it, and when I was in my early 30s.
For sure. So describe like your first show experience. Like, did you feel terrified? Were you nervous? Like, what was the prep like? Kind of take us through that first show experience.
Yeah, so it was exciting. I don't think I was nervous. I had a trainer, and I don't think he had much experience in coaching, because it was kind of like the same diet, like a very like very little calorie diet. and it worked for the time being because I've always, been able to build muscle. I mean, easily, not easily, but I mean, genetically, I can build muscle, compared to other people. But it was basically a lot of eating very little and doing a lot of cardio. So I got very lean, but at that point in time, I didn't have much muscle maturity for that. So it was just fun. I placed fourth out of four. But I look good. I mean, looking back, it's like, ooh, but I felt pretty confident. I was just excited that, oh my gosh, I finally was able to compete. And it was really cool. Yeah. So I continued since.
Oh, that's really cool. So, obviously, like you said, you just kind of caught the bug there. So how many shows would you say that you've competed in overall throughout the years?
Oh gosh. Maybe 18, 20 shows, maybe.
Okay. So maybe about 18, 20 shows. So how many shows in did it take you? Because obviously you've won some shows before. How many shows did it take you, or how many years did it take you to earn your first win in a figure competition?
Actually, on my second show, which was really interesting because say I had my son in the summer of 2008. So exactly a year later, I was ready for my second show ever. And I took first place and I won overall. So that was one of the things that made me, I can do this and I can help other women because if I was able to overcome, pregnancy weight, because I had gained 50 pounds during my pregnancy. And as soon as I was able, I had a C-section. So as soon as I was able to work out after my C-section, which was like 6, 8 weeks, I went back to the gym and started lifting again and, eating, correctly according to what I need to do. Um, and I was able to lose the 50 pounds like in 4 months. So after that, I decided to prep for my second show, which was the following summer, and I won. So, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So coming back from having your son, having a C-section, gaining 50 pounds, losing 50 pounds, and still winning, like mentally, like how do you stay focused during this whole time? I mean, obviously, like for a lot of people, it's like you're going through pregnancy, you're gaining a bunch of weight, you were still focused enough to be able to actually win a show. Like, how did you stay so mentally focused during this time?
I was just, I think I was very motivated. I remember I live in Indiana, so we usually get a couple, but like pretty harsh snows up here. So where are you at?
Wisconsin.
Okay, so you know about it.
Yeah,
So
also in the Midwest. Yep.
yeah, okay, so we're not too far. So I do recall like it was like a January because I had started my prep back in January, and there was like 3 feet of snow, and I still walked to the gym with my boots because I was not gonna miss a workout. I was just super motivated to do it again because I was just excited, and that just fueled me up. I was like, oh man, I was able to lose my pregnancy weight. I know I can get in state shape again. So I was just very it wasn't even it was hard, but at that point in time I was in my early 30s. I was like super super motivated about things. It
For
wasn't a
sure.
drag per se.
For sure, for sure. So now you won your first show. So how did things kind of progress from you from here? I know you mentioned like when you got into your mid 30s, you were struggling with some health concerns as well.
Yeah, so and I would say that maybe part of the competing too much didn't help. At that point in time there was really little to no information about metabolic adaptations and all that stuff. And my mom has hypothyroidism, and of course I never thought I'd have that. But like in my mid 30s, I was 34, 35. It was just getting only harder to get lean for shows because I was doing like 2 shows a year, and I would only take very few months off, and then I started prepping again. So that seems to be a mistake that a lot of competitors get into. But back then, competitions were not as popular as they are now. So little was known about this. So to me, I was like, what is going on? So just the constant competing, it didn't really help the fact that I was already predisposed to hypothyroidism. So I went to the doctor because I had gained like 20 pounds, and I was not able to take him off at this point in time. My body wasn't responding anymore. I had zero energy. And he's like, well, your thyroid is like barely working. So I actually had to take like that year off from um, competing because I was in such a bad place. So I started to get treated for hypothyroidism when I was 34, 35. And I competed again when I turned 37, I want to say, once all that was resolved and being treated. But at that point, ever since, it was a lot harder to get ready for shows. So it just became harder, and it was physical and mentally, like it was a struggle at that point in time.
Oh, I bet. So obviously the hypothyroidism, like I said, made it harder to get lean. It was harder to prepare for shows. So is hypothyroidism something that you see in a lot of women who you coach?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of times women will come to me that, they can't seem to, lose the weight, right? So a lot of the women that I work with are either late 30s or, 40s and 50s. And many times they've never been tested for anything. Their blood work is very simple, just regular blood work. So I always tell them, just make sure that we do a full thyroid panel, just to see, besides just TSH. So free T3, free T4, TSH, reverse T3, to look all into that just to see where you're at, and then take it from there. Because if your thyroid is in a bad place, it's just hard to even have motivation to anything. Your digestion goes to hell, your sleep is poor, your mood is bad. So that's one of the things that doesn't allow people to even be motivated to eat better or move more. They're just in such a bad head place and just physical place. So that's one of the number one things that I always ask, new clients. We need to go through blood work and make sure that your internal health is in a good place. Because if all the internal health hormonally, you're not in a good place, it's going to be really hard to get you where you want to be.
For sure. So what were some things that you did personally to treat your hypothyroidism and help like improve your ability to continue to lose body fat and build muscle?
Well, at that point in time, actually, the doctor that diagnosed me, he was pretty proactive about that, right? So he's the first one that actually looked into complete blood work of all hormones, all thyroid, all sex hormones. And, he diagnosed me, and he did put me on not the synthetic form, but the medication that has T4, T3, that is the natural source one. And he started treating me like that. So then he retired, and it was kind of hard to find someone else. So I was able to find someone else like 2, 3 years later. And now I have, a good physician that works with me. But yeah, basically medication, lifestyle, nutrition, supplementing with iodine, just so the dose is not so high of the medication.
Okay. So after, you got diagnosed with hypothyroidism, what kind of happened from here? Like what happened kind of next for you in your fitness journey after that?
After I was diagnosed?
Yeah, just after you're diagnosed, and you mentioned it was harder. Like how have things kind of progressed for you from there?
So, as I said, like became harder to get lean for competitions. So at this point, then I started slowing down and doing just one competition a year. And then eventually, like, I didn't compete for 1 year. My last year was in 2018 because I was just so burned out. And I haven't competed since then until now because, I realized my body needs a break here. So I took the 4 years, yeah, 4.5 years, to just kind of allow my body to rest because I was just pushing it for over a decade. And your body will start to fight you harder and harder, right? So I stopped competing, and I was just focusing more on my nutrition and just lifting just to build muscle, stay healthy, find some sort of balance, which when you're a competitor, there's really no balance. It's bodybuilding is such an extreme sport, it's not health and fitness, it's more like extreme fitness. So if you are in that place for too long, your body will suffer. I mean, physically and mentally. So yeah, I mean, I took the time off, and now, I mean, it's taken me 4 years to come back around to even want to potentially diet down for a show, right? So that's kind of what happened.
For sure.
I'm
So
47 now, by the way.
what'd you say?
I am 47 years old now. So yeah, it was like kind of in my early 20s that I had to like stop pushing on the gas.
For sure. So what did make you decide to want to get back into it and go for your pro card again?
Um, I felt like I felt in a good place mentally and physically. I feel like I was away from trying to lose weight for a while. So that allowed, my mind to have a good break. I took vacations with my family and just focused on my family and just kind of disconnected from competing. And I actually had said I don't want to compete ever again because I was just so um I'm not traumatized, but I was just over it. So this past year, I was just getting out of hand. I was getting, overweight, not overweight, but it was not within my standard, especially if I'm a fitness professional. I can't be just like out of shape. And I would say that compared to the general population, I wasn't out of shape, but for my standards, I was. So in December, I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go on prep and see how it goes, see how my body responds. And it actually responded really well. So I was able to lean out, within 8 weeks, I had dropped to, I had dropped a lot of weight than I normally would in the past. So, and then I was able to reverse diet from there. So I haven't been just like starving myself. So I've been able to eat enough to carry on with this prep through now.
So
So, yeah.
yeah, so that's really interesting. So like you said, you kind of just felt motivated again after, taking 4.5 years off to kind of, cool down. Because right, like you said, and I've only done, one show before, but obviously it takes a lot of focus, right? It takes sacrifice from a family standpoint, from a personal standpoint. Like definitely a lot of things get sacrificed in order to prioritize that one thing. But kind of take
Yeah.
us through like what does like a prep look like for you? Like what, like what were your starting calories? Like what are your calories at now? Why don't we just start with the nutrition side?
So we can start, like say, with this, my current prep. So I have worked myself. I was eating about 2,200 calories, 2,300 calories, depending on, where I was. This past year, last couple of years, throwing in holidays and vacations and where I can get to indulge a little bit more. But I was just focused on lifting for some time for the last 4 years. So my metabolism wasn't in a good place already. I wasn't, I guess, compromised just for the fact that I took that time off. So I started out about 2,300 calories in December. So I dropped them down to 1,800. And I was just walking 20 minutes a day. So that's where I started. I cleaned up my nutrition as far as food sources. Um, Food sources being a big one. I basically removed it's crazy how your body will respond when you focus on eating just whole foods, 95%, opposed to having so much processed stuff like crackers and stupid stuff like that it's not worth it. So remove all the uh, highly processed foods and focusing on my 1,800 calories of just, whole foods and prioritize some protein. So I kept it at about a gram of protein per body pound, and that's what I've been doing. So my protein really hasn't changed. In any case, has increased a little bit. But if your body's responding to the current protocol, so I started 1,800 calories. I did pretty good progress for about 4 weeks. Then I started to stall. Then I just cut back to, like 1,650 and increased my cardio to 25 minutes. So basically, as your body starts to fight you, then, you need to either cut calories a little bit or increase cardio or a little bit of both, depending on what is doable for you. So that's what I've been doing. So as you progress, usually your calories start to be less. I've been fortunate that I was able to stay at about 1,600 calories and I didn't have to drop anymore. And I took a diet break there mid-March, and I was able to start going up on my calories without ruining my progress.
And can I pause you there 1 second? Not everyone probably listening knows what a diet break is. Can you explain the purpose of a diet break and how you structured yours?
Yeah, so a diet break is basically not stop. How do I put it? It's not about, oh, say, screw the diet, I'm just going to eat whatever. No, it's basically just playing with your calories. So what you do if you are in a calorie deficit for some time, in order to prevent adaptations from happening and helping you psychologically as well, you can spend a week or two just on maintenance calories, right? So you want to make sure that you don't go on a surplus because you don't necessarily want to be gaining weight. So you figure out what your maintenance calories are, and that gives your metabolism, your body, a chance to realize that, oh, I'm not dieting down, right? So therefore, it really helps your hormones be a little bit more stable, especially thyroid. As you are dieting down, your thyroid will fight you back, so it'll be suppressed. So if you are able to take a diet break for as long as you need to take it, a couple of weeks usually is the standard. Then your body, once you're ready to start dieting again, your body will respond again in case you were to stall. So the diet break is for the purpose of allowing your body to realize that you're not trying to lose weight per se, right? So it allows you to resume your fat loss again without being so tough.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. Appreciate you kind of explaining how it works. Obviously, a very planned and scheduled thing, not like a break where you're just, going all out on eating whatever. So
No, no, you keep your good sources of food,
yeah,
but you just basically increase your calories to maintenance opposed to being in a calorie deficit.
for sure, for sure. And yeah, for those who don't know, so a deficit is where you're in a calorie deficit where you're aiming to lose weight, and then a maintenance period is where you're aiming to maintain your weight. And obviously the caloric intake is going to be different based on the individual. But okay, so you took a diet break and then continue with what you're talking about previously.
Yeah, so at that point I did hire a coach, just for the fact that I can get started on prep, but eventually at some point you can't, your vision of yourself starts to get a bit distorted. So I needed help, right? So I got my coach and we got on board, and he I just hand everything to him. So we basically just cut calories a little bit. I started to lose body fat, and I was losing pretty fast. So we needed to pull on the brakes a little bit. So we started reverse diet, so increase 50 calories a week, and I was still making progress. Because what happens a lot is once you get into a rhythm and you're leaning out, your insulin sensitivity improves. So then it just becomes a little bit easier to manage things. So I think my insulin sensitivity improved, was in a good place. And I was just losing body fat again when I was adding a little bit of calories without, at least in my mind, I felt like I was in a good place opposed to just cutting calories down to the bone. So that's why this prep has been a lot more manageable, just because I've been able to eat more than the average prep that I did in the past. Well, all we did was just cut calories.
For sure, for sure. So what does your training look like? Like, what did it look like kind of when you're starting, and what does it look like right now?
Training doesn't really change. Like, that's the variable that doesn't change when you're off season or where you're prepping. So I lift 5 times a week, and coming from a figure background to bikini, it has changed a little bit, just because in figure they want to see much more dense muscle, a more muscular back, more muscular legs, everything. So in bikini, they're going for more of an aesthetic look of fit, right? Not too much muscle, still muscle compared to the general population. You still have to have a lot of muscle, but more focused on glute development. So I've been focusing a little bit more on training glutes with more frequency and volume now compared to where I used to train when I was doing figure. So, I train glutes 3 times a week now. And then my upper body, I have cut back. And again, that's very individual. Me, for myself, I tend to put on muscle a little bit easy, just from what I mentioned earlier. So once I started training upper body again, I gained muscle pretty easily. So I had to cut back on my upper body training now, just so I can fit the criteria of bikini. So
For
in a
sure.
sense, it's easier.
There you go. There you go. Okay. Yeah, thanks for explaining your kind of personal training, how you personally train. Obviously, it depends on what, muscle groups you're trying to bring up and things like that, and what development you're looking for in different aspects of your physique. Um, so kind of walk us through, like, what are some of the biggest reasons women come to you, and how exactly do you work with these women?
So most of the women that I help, they're in their 40s or 50s or even 60s. And they come to me because they can relate to me, right? I'm 47, and a lot of women start to struggle with, staying fit or becoming fit, late 30s or in their early 40s. Seems like once you pass that 40 mark, everybody thinks that it's over, right? So I do educate them about, strength training, the importance of strength training. And a lot of these women have already been lifting, but more casually, right? And they're like, I want to look like more toned, right? So I explained to them that we need to make sure you maintain or increase muscle mass and decrease body fat percentage, just so you can see the muscle, which is the muscle tone. So I set up a structured program for them, focus on progressive overload. So depending on how many times a week they can train, some people can train only 3 times a week, some people 4, some people 5. So it all depends on where they are in their journey. And then the bigger one is going to be their nutrition, because everybody comes to me saying, I eat healthy. I mean, what does healthy mean?
Right. Heard that one
Um,
quite a few times.
yeah, I eat
Yeah.
healthy, but I can't lose weight.
Yep.
Well, we need to look at it, what it is that you're healthy eating. So I have them log for a few days, and then they give me what they've logged, and I have to figure out, based on the macros that they've done, then I have to figure out what macronutrients I need to set up for them to, again, depending on where they are. Do we need to focus on just building muscle? Do we need to focus on body recomposition, or do we need to focus on just fat loss? So it all depends on, like training experience, how long they've been training, where they are with their body fat percentage. Some people are, very, very overweight. Some people are kind of skinny fat. So I have to set things up based on what each individual needs, because it will be definitely set up differently for everyone.
For
So
sure.
that's how I guide them. And then, I also have them do reports for the accountability portion, and then their training changes every 4 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. So you take them obviously through a very holistic process. Obviously, everything's going to be personalized to the individual. So a lot of the women that you're coming through, I imagine if you're coaching them into their, late 40s, 50s, 60s, you're obviously dealing with, changing hormones, body and physique is different than how it was. How do you approach someone who is maybe going through early stages of menopause or menopause? And, obviously both from a mental standpoint and from a physical standpoint.
So if they are local, I do have a physician that I work with, that he's the one who's helped me with my hormonal issues as well. So depending on the symptoms that they might express, a lot of times they're thinking that it's hormones, but it's really their lifestyle, right? So they're not prioritizing sleep, their nutrition is poor, their protein is barely existent. So first, I try to set up the program and try to optimize these variables that we can, manipulate on our end. So, eating the right amount of food, the right sources, focusing on nutrition dense foods, as I mentioned, focusing on being consistent with their caloric intake from these nutritious foods, focusing on increasing sleep time, because a lot of these women are sleeping like 4 or 5 hours. So if you're not sleeping at least 7, yes, you're going to feel like crap the next day. And then it becomes a cycle. So then they're drinking wine every night. So all these things that are so impactful, they think that it's normal, but it's not normal. So if we can manage those variables, a lot of times that's all it really takes for them to start feeling better physically and then mood wise. And if it's a case where there's no response to any of the above, then we can look a little deeper into further blood work and see where they are with that and being treated that in that regard.
For sure. So obviously it's going to be right depending on the individual. I'm sure a lot of it is difficult and a lot of it is lifestyle based as well. So What are some things, like, as you've gone through your journey, maybe like one or two things that you maybe used to believe earlier on in your journey that you now realize, now that you are a veteran, experienced both competitor and coach, that aren't as true? Like, what are a couple of things, couple of kind of myths you've busted of your former beliefs?
Um, that you have to cut carbs to lose body fat. That's not true. You can still eat carbs. Again, you know, what carbs, right? So to some people, carbs means cookies and pasta and, stuff like that. But I'm talking about carbs from good sources that are, potatoes, rice, some high fiber breads, fruit. So if you can keep those sources of carbs, there's no, along with a balanced nutrition plan, then you should be able to make progress and lose body fat. Another myth is that you have to do fasted cardio. So just from research that's been recent in the last few years, it's been noted that no, doing fasted cardio is no better than doing fed-stead cardio. At the end of the day, it comes to energy balance. So when you do your cardio, if you need to do cardio, it's not relevant. What's the other one? I'd say, eating at night is going to make you gain weight. So again, going back to the energy balance equation, it really comes down to your caloric intake during a 24-hour period, and being consistent, week after week. Even if you were to, push your carbs a little bit later in the day and eat a little bit more of the food at the end of the day, as long as you are hitting your correct amount of macros at the end of the day, it doesn't matter when you eat that food. Now, of course, there's nuances depending on individual and what their preferences are and what's doable for them. But technically, it's not really that big of a deal. What else? What else? I think those are pretty big. Some of the big ones that I can think of right now. I'm sure there's many, but can't think of anything else right now.
Right. But obviously a lot of fitness myths, but for sure you definitely covered a lot of big ones right there. So I want to finish with two questions for you. So the first question is, where can people find out more about you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Laura Marenco, just Laura Marenco, you'll find me, or on my website, lauramarencofitness.com. So those two are probably the best ways to find me if they needed to contact me for XYZ.
For sure. And then the last question I have, I always ask this to all of our guests, is let's say we're fast forwarding, it's the end of your life. You've lived a good life. You've done everything that you wanted to do. You've achieved everything that you've wanted to achieve. How do you want people to remember you?
As someone who changed their life and helped them when they needed the help with their health and transforming their body. Because at the end of the day, the only thing you take with you really is your body and your health. If you can help people optimize their health so that as they get older, they are moving better and they feel so much better in general, and if they can remember me as, oh yeah, Laura is the one who taught me how to lift this way. Laura is the one who taught me the importance of protein. Or if it wasn't for Laura, I would have never realized that all I wanted to do was cardio, and in reality, I needed to lift weights. And she educated me on XYZ that has helped me turn my life around. So.
Awesome. Love all those things. And thanks so much for sharing your journey of all the challenges that you've overcome to get to where you are now, and how
Thank
you're
you.
staying focused and still working at it regardless. So appreciate your time. And I know anyone who listens to this will get a lot out of it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.